They laughed. You remember the sound, sharp, metallic, echoing in your chest like shrapnel. It wasn't just laughter, it was dismissal. It was the moment the world decided what you were worth. The moment their eyes looked through you instead of at you. You tried to smile it off, tried to pretend it didn't burn, but something inside you cracked quietly. That's how power begins, not with triumph, but with the taste of humiliation that never fades. That's when you first felt the shift, when the ground beneath your pride turned into glass, and every step since has been deliberate, silent, dangerous. You used to think they'd help you if you fell, that they'd reach out when things got dark. But people don't reach for the fallen, they step over them. They don't care how much you've lost, only that it wasn't them. Their laughter wasn't cruelty, it was confirmation. Confirmation that you didn't belong yet, that your fire hadn't burned hot enough to make them fear you. Every betrayal, every moment of being overlooked wasn't punishment, it was initiation. The first stage of becoming something they'll whisper about later, when they realize you were never meant to stay small. You began to see clearly after that. Every smile hid calculation. Every friendship had a clock on it. Every compliment was a leash. The truth was simple. Loyalty dies in hunger, and kindness evaporates when opportunity knocks. You watch people trade their integrity for attention, their honesty for comfort, their souls for a little applause. And you realized something you were never supposed to fit in with. You were supposed to outlast them. Their comfort became your enemy, their laughter your prophecy. You stopped chasing approval. You stopped defending your silence. You let them talk. You let them mock. Because predators don't explain themselves to sheep. You started building in secret, cutting yourself open to understand the machinery of your own weakness. You dissected fear. You rewired pain. You replaced empathy with observation, mercy with distance, and dreams with plan. The world that once pitied you began to feel smaller, slower, softer. You could feel yourself hardening, not from hate, but from clarity. The next time they looked at you, they didn't laugh, they hesitated. Something about your eyes had changed, no warmth, no plea, just calculation. You had stopped reacting. That's what terrified them. Because when a person who used to care stops caring, the balance of power shifts. They could sense it. The quiet beneath your voice, the stillness that only predators have before they strike. You didn't need to prove anything anymore. You had become the storm they never saw forming, and deep down they knew it. The same mouths that once mocked you now trembled when you entered the room. They could feel something ancient in your silence, something that remembered every scar, every betrayal. Every ounce of pain you turned into strategy. You had become the embodiment of what they feared most, someone who survived humiliation and didn't break, someone who turned pain into prophecy, someone who looked into the fire and didn't flinch. They laughed once, but that was before you realized that power doesn't shout, it watches. Before you learned that pain doesn't weaken, it refines. Before you became the kind of silence that echoes louder than thunder. You were the one they buried too early, the ghost that refused to stay quiet. And now, when they see you, something in them remembers the laughter and regrets it. Because you didn't just rise, you remembered. And you came back with eyes that no longer beg, only measure. Weakness doesn't enter your life like a storm. It seeps in like warm air, gentle and invisible. It starts when you choose comfort over confrontation, when you avoid the sting of truth and accept the soft lie that you have time. It's in the moments you call rest, but are really surrendered. You used to move with fire. Now you wait for permission. That's how the cage is built, not with iron bars, but with habits you defend. You stop chasing pain, and you call it peace. You stop fighting, and you call it balance. But peace without power is submission disguised as sanity. They told you weakness was human, that softness made you kind, that silence meant humility. But what they really wanted was obedience. The system doesn't punish the weak, it feeds on them. Every comfort you accept is another chain you polish yourself. They train you to fear discomfort because discomfort wakes the sleeping parts of you. It sharpens instinct, burns illusion, makes you unpredictable. But predictability is the goal. The machine loves when you know your place. The world runs smoothly when you doubt your own fire. You were born to move like a storm, violent, precise, untamed. Yet somewhere between fear and acceptance, you traded your thunder for applause. You smile when you should have questioned. You wait when you should have struck. You lower your eyes hoping someone will see your goodness, not realizing they only see your surrender. Weakness is not an absence of strength, it's the addiction to safety. And safety has never built anything worth remembering. Look closely at those who betrayed you. They didn't break you with violence. They broke you with comfort. They gave you a taste of validation, made you feel seen, then taught you to depend on it. They whispered, "You're doing enough," while watching your hunger fade. Every compliment was a tranquilizer. Every "it's okay" was poison. They never needed to chain your hands, they only had to convince you to stop reaching. The soft cage is beautiful from the inside. It feels warm, safe, familiar. You decorate it with routines, habits, and excuses. You tell yourself you'll leave when the time is right, when you're ready, when things calm down. But nothing ever calms down. Time doesn't pause for hesitation. The cage doesn't unlock itself. And one day, you look around and realize you're not being held back by others. You're being held hostage by your own comfort. You think fear is your enemy, but fear was always your signal. Fear means the door is near. It means growth is close enough to touch, but you turned away every time it called. You worship stability because you mistook it for peace. But peace without progress is decay. You're not supposed to feel calm all the time. You're supposed to feel alive. The edge is where you remember who you are. The pain is where you rediscover power. They will call you cold when you stop begging for warmth. They will call you ruthless when you stop apologizing for existing. That's how you know you're leaving the cage. Weakness will plead for you to stay, whispering that strength makes you lonely. But loneliness is a small price for sovereignty. You can't serve your fears and your future at the same time, so you break the pattern. You stop waiting for permission. You stop explaining your hunger. You let the softness rot and the fire return, because the truth is brutal. No one saves you from weakness. You burn your way out. They told you the system was fair, that if you worked hard, stayed polite, and followed the rules, you'd rise. But they never said the game was rigged from the start. The system wasn't built for you to win. It was built to keep you predictable. Every billboard, every post, every motivational slogan, they weren't meant to inspire you. They were meant to pacify you, to make you believe progress was a straight line while they kept the ladder greased. You were trained to feel guilty for wanting power, to mistake obedience for virtue, to call your own silence peace. From childhood, they made you believe control was wrong. They told you to be kind, but not strong. They celebrated your humility while feeding on your hesitation. The system doesn't punish weakness, it rewards it, because weak minds are easy to steer. Every convenience was designed as a chain, the feed, the comfort, the instant hit of validation. They call it connection, but it's surveillance. They call it freedom, but it's addiction disguised as choice. You scroll while they study you. You speak, and they record the tremor in your tone. Your habits are currency, your fear is data. Your attention, their throne. Look closely at the faces that preach morality. The ones who say, just be yourself. They don't mean it. What they mean is stay small, stay soft, stay safe. Because the moment you think independently, you become a threat. The system thrives on the illusion of fairness while it quietly decides who gets to matter. And every time you seek approval, you feed it. Every time you apologize for being different, it tightens its hold. The world doesn't want you free. It wants you functional, controlled, efficient, predictable. They made loyalty a trap. They told you teamwork is power, but real power never shares the map. They told you to love unconditionally, while they loved you for convenience. They told you to forgive endlessly, while they weaponized your compassion. Every smiling face hides a contract. Every handshake hides a hierarchy. The more you give, the more they take, until you start asking why you were taught to serve before you were taught to see. And you start seeing the cracks, the fake smiles, the hollow promises, the way they praise the exhausted, not the awake. You realize ambition was never your enemy, only their fear of it. You begin to understand why they mock those who choose solitude, why they ridicule silence. Because silence is observation, and observation is power. The quiet ones see too much. They remember too well. They move when others sleep. That's why they fear you when you go still. The system needs noise. It needs chaos. It needs you scrolling, reacting, defending, proving. Because when you stop reacting, you start thinking. And when you start thinking, you begin dismantling their design. You notice how every comfort was crafted to dull your edge. You see that every safe path is just another corridor in a maze meant to keep you occupied. You stop asking for direction, and the walls start falling apart. You learn that freedom isn't rebellion, it's refusal. Refusal to play their game. Refusal to explain your silence. Refusal to be predictable. The day you stop needing validation is the day the system loses its leverage. And when you walk into a room with eyes that no longer beg, they don't know what to do with you. They feel it, the shift, the threat, the unspoken defiance. You've stopped being the pawn. You've become the variable, the anomaly, the one they can't measure, can't predict, can't own. And that's when you realize the truth they never wanted you to see. The most dangerous man alive isn't the one who fights the system. It's the one who learns how to see through it. You learned that silence was never weakness. It was camouflage. When they underestimated you, you listened. When they mocked you, you memorized every word. You became fluent in their arrogance, patient in their cruelty, invisible in your evolution. You stopped wasting energy trying to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You began studying the rhythm of power, how predators never announce their presence, how storms build quietly before they destroy. You realized that real strength never argues, never begs, never warns. It just moves, silent, unstoppable, surgical. The old version of you wanted to be seen, to prove worth, to be understood. But that version died the moment you realized attention is a trap and noise is bait. Now you move differently. You speak only when necessary, and when you do, every word lands like a blade. You've learned that patience is not passivity, it's preparation. Every delay is strategy. Every pause is positioning. You've become the shadow in the room, present but untouchable, observing, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment when chaos exposes weakness. And you strike once, clean, without hesitation, without remorse. You learn to disappear in plain sight, to be underestimated until it becomes your greatest weapon. They think you've gone quiet because you've given up. They don't realize you've gone silent because you've outgrown noise. They still chase validation. You chase leverage. They still talk about loyalty. You study their patterns. You've seen enough betrayal to understand that loyalty is rare and honesty is currency. You don't beg for trust anymore. You observe who earns it in silence. Because real power isn't loud. It doesn't perform. It simply bends the room around its presence. You became the watcher behind the curtain, the unseen architect shaping outcomes while others fight for attention. You mastered the art of letting fools reveal themselves. Their arrogance feeds your patience. Their noise fuels your stillness. They expose intentions, you record evidence. They burn bridges, you build tunnels. You've learned the elegance of unpredictability, how it unsettles those addicted to control. You no longer explain your plans, because explaining is surrender. You move like a ghost, and ghosts don't need validation. They haunt quietly, reminding everyone that disappearance is also a form of dominance. You started wearing restraint like armor. You don't respond to provocation. You let people drown in their own projections. You've become immune to emotional manipulation because you no longer fight for closure. You let distance do the cutting. You've mastered the sacred art of not reacting, and in that restraint you've become terrifying. People fear what they can't predict, and you've turned unpredictability into your defense system. You no longer chase opportunities. You attract them by existing in absolute control. That's the paradox of power. The more silent you become, the louder your presence feels. They say the shadow follows the light, but you learn to reverse it. You lead from the darkness, making light chase you. You've accepted that being misunderstood is the tax of mastery. That isolation is the birthplace of clarity. You don't crave belonging anymore, you crave precision. Every move, every word, every silence, strategic. You've studied the ancient laws that still govern human behavior, that chaos consumes the unprepared, and patience buries the impulsive. And now you walk among the same people who once underestimated you, not as their equal, but as their quiet reckoning. They still talk, still project, still pretend. But when you enter the room, the air changes. Eyes avoid yours. Voices drop. Instinct recognizes hierarchy before the mind does. Because power doesn't announce itself, it's felt. You became the silence they can't ignore, the calm they can't read, the storm they never see coming. You are no longer chasing control. You are control. You are the shadow, and the world trembles when you move. Pain was never your enemy. It was the architect that carved out the version of you they now fear. Every betrayal, every silent rejection, every time someone pretended not to see your worth, it was all training. You thought pain was punishment, but it was refinement. It stripped you of illusions, peeled away the need to be liked, and burned off the softness that once begged to be understood. You stopped asking why. You started listening to the silence between the suffering. Where discipline was born, the same moments that shattered you also rebuilt you, piece by calculated piece, into something sharper than their comfort could ever tolerate. There was a time you flinched when life hit back. You sought sympathy, validation, closure, proof that you mattered. But power doesn't ask for proof. Power endures. You learned that empathy, when wasted on the wrong people, becomes a weapon against yourself. They fed off your kindness, mistook your loyalty for weakness, and smiled while you bled out trying to save them. But you don't bleed anymore. You study, you observe, you convert pain into data, betrayal into intelligence, heartbreak into leverage. Every scar on your mind is a map, showing you where not to return, who not to trust, and what must be done when it's time to strike. You stopped explaining your pain to people who benefit from your confusion. You stopped performing humility for those who worship power in secret. Instead, you began to weaponize what they thought would destroy you. Pain became your blacksmith. Fire became your forge. You started carrying your silence like a sword, cutting through every room without ever having to speak. The ones who laughed once, notice how quiet they are now. They sense it. That vibration of restrained chaos in your calm. The kind of energy that doesn't beg for respect. It commands it. You realize that pain gives birth to focus. When you lose enough, when everything that was supposed to protect you turns into a threat, something ancient wakes up inside you. It's not rage, it's clarity. It's the voice that says, stop running. It's the stillness that comes when you finally understand survival is not about strength, it's about precision. You don't react anymore. You calculate. You don't chase revenge. You let consequences unfold like clockwork. That's when pain becomes power, not when you escape it, but when you absorb it without flinching. The scars they mocked are now your credentials, proof that you've lived through fire and returned colder, quieter, unreadable. You don't announce your evolution because evolution doesn't need applause. It moves in silence. You've turned suffering into a private language only the disciplined can understand. Every disappointment recalibrated your patience. Every loss trained your restraint. Every heartbreak hardened your resolve. That's why you're dangerous now. Not because you have nothing to lose, but because you've already lost enough to fear nothing. So you carry yourself differently. You no longer need to be seen to be known. You exist in the tension between calm and catastrophe, and that makes people uneasy. They can't predict you anymore. And unpredictability is lethal in a world addicted to patterns. You used to beg for peace. Now you generate it. You used to fear pain. Now you sculpt with it. Pain no longer drags you down. It reports to you. It's your informant, your strategist, your armor. You were never broken. You were sharpened. Pain wasn't there to end you. It was sent to introduce you to the version of yourself that couldn't be manipulated, couldn't be silenced, couldn't be destroyed. Now, when they look at you, they don't see the wound. They see the weapon. You walk into the room and the air shifts. It's not confidence they feel. It's control. The kind that makes people hesitate before they speak, as if your silence itself is a verdict. Once, you used to chase validation, trying to prove your worth through noise. But now you understand that power doesn't roar. It watches. You've learned that the loudest one in the room is usually the weakest. You've seen them brag, boast, and burn out. You've seen kings lose thrones because they couldn't stop explaining themselves. Now, you move like a shadow that knows it can kill the light. You stopped reacting the day you realized reaction is a form of submission. Every flinch, every defense, every attempt to be understood was a weapon they used against you. So you taught yourself stillness. You rewired your instincts to turn tension into calculation. Where others feel panic, you feel pattern. Every insult becomes data. Every betrayal becomes blueprint. You've turned pain into a tracking system, fear into precision. That's why they can't read you anymore. You became fluent in silence, and that's a language most can't survive. They used to call you distant. Now they call you dangerous, but you never changed. You just stopped bleeding for people who brought knives to your trust. You stopped explaining your absence, stopped defending your solitude. Because power grows in the dark, not under the spotlight. The storm you carry isn't chaos, it's containment. Every scar is a sigil carved by your own evolution, each one sealing away the old version of you that begged to be seen. You no longer chase light, you became the storm that swallows it. Now, when they look at you, they can't tell what you're thinking, and that's exactly how you built it. You became unreadable. Predictability was the weapon that got you hurt. Now, unpredictability is your shield. They whisper that you've changed, but what really terrifies them is that you've stopped needing them. Your energy no longer leaks through desperation or approval. You walk in silence and silence obeys you, because real dominance isn't announced, it's felt. Like the tremor before an earthquake that never warns twice. Every move you make is intentional. You speak less because you've seen what words cost. You smile less because you've learned how masks betray emotion. You wait longer because timing is the assassin of arrogance. You learn patience from pain, the kind of patience that kills quickly once it decides. You became the eye of your own storm, calm while everything else breaks apart. You learned that the true predator doesn't chase, it observes until the prey forgets it's being watched. And by the time they notice, it's already over. Now, power doesn't excite you. Control does. The control to walk away, to say nothing, to choose solitude over company that drains you. You stopped being afraid of being misunderstood, because those who need to understand you never will. And those who do don't need words. You've entered a realm few survive, the mental battlefield where emotion is weapon and restraint is victory. You're no longer playing to win. You're playing to end games before they begin. So when you walk in, silence follows. Not because you demand respect, but because everything about you reminds them what they lost. Focus, restraint, purpose. You've become what they fear most, someone who cannot be manipulated. Someone who mastered both the light and the shadow. You are the storm contained within calm breath, the quiet before something inevitable. You don't need to roar anymore. The world already flinches when you enter the room. The room fell silent, not because they respected you, but because they finally realized what they were standing in front of. The same eyes they once mocked now carried something ancient, something unbreakable. They felt it in their bones before their minds could name it. The shift, the death of who you were, the birth of something colder, stronger. You didn't need to speak. The air around you carried your history like static. Every betrayal, every humiliation, every night you wanted to disappear now forged into an aura they couldn't understand. You weren't angry anymore. Anger was human. You had gone beyond that. Once, you begged for closure. You wanted them to explain why they left, why they lied, why they laughed. But now, you understand. Closure is a luxury for the weak. The predator doesn't need the apology of prey. You learned to stop chasing answers from people who were never capable of honesty. You stopped bleeding for those who enjoyed watching you fall. And that silence, that quiet defiance, became your most terrifying weapon. Because in a world addicted to noise, a person who says nothing and means everything is a god among echoes. They used to think power was loud. They thought it came with titles, attention, applause. You learned the truth. Power doesn't announce itself. It enters the room and changes the temperature. It bends time. It slows conversation. It makes people watch their words, even when you haven't spoken. That's the new you, the calm before every storm. The reason their laughter dies mid-sentence, they sense it now. The danger in your stillness, the calculation in your patience. You've become the living embodiment of consequence. Once you were the one trying to prove your worth. Now, worth walks beside you like a shadow. You don't seek validation anymore. You provoke reflection. People can no longer look at you without seeing their own cowardice mirrored back. Your silence forces them to confront the truth. They broke something they'll never be able to rebuild. You used to fear losing them. Now, you fear losing the version of yourself that tolerated them. That version died quietly, and no one came to its funeral. You stopped running. You stopped explaining. You learned that wolves don't bark, they wait. You mastered the art of stillness, of letting others reveal their desperation first. And when they do, when they stumble over their excuses or try to crawl back under the warmth of your control, you don't need to retaliate. You simply watch. because nothing destroys a manipulator faster than your indifference. They wanted to feed on your reaction. You starved them with your silence. There's something biblical about your evolution, like an angel who fell not because he was evil, but because he saw through the illusion of heaven. You now understand that purity without power is just decoration. That kindness without boundaries invites decay. You've become the quiet force that terrifies the fake, humbles the loud, and reminds the broken that strength was never about muscles. It was about restraint. Now when you walk into rooms, the energy bends. Conversations fracture, eyes lower. The demons they once worshipped, fear, greed, arrogance, tremble at the discipline in your presence. You've become the nightmare of every manipulator, the storm they can't predict. They whisper your name differently now, not as gossip, but as warning. And though you say nothing, the message is clear. The age of noise is over. The era of silence has begun. Comfort kills, silence wins. Weakness bleeds. You were never meant to blend in with the crowd. You were meant to walk through it and make the air itself bow.